Now, for a deeper look at this situation, a Global Affairs Analyst, Shahzada Rahim, joins me via Skype from Turkey. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
So I don't know if you followed a press briefing by a U.S. general yesterday, I think it was, when he said that, look, the possibility of Russia overrunning Ukraine is close to zero. And he also said that Ukrainian military victory of kicking the Russians out of Ukraine anytime soon is also not high. And I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yesterday's military assessment by the top U.S. journal was this is preliminary in my opinion, because we know that the Russian war, it has been 9 months since the war began, and right now it's in the most critical stage. The Russians are trying their best to push harder into the Donbass region, and they're not going to back down. And we know that in order to understand his assessment, in my opinion, his assessment is limited. We know that 2 months ago, Vladimir Putin appointed a new general to head the special military operation in Ukraine. His name is Sergei Surovikin. And Sergei Surovikin is one of the men, pillar of the Russian military. He led the Russian war in Ukraine, in Syria, and was very successful, in defeating Daesh and defeating rebels in saving Assad. So Putin knows, this general, it's very strategic when it comes to the war strategy. So he was appointed on the critical time. So if we want to see, the recent, whatever happened in Ukraine, the Russians back down from the Kherson region, but according to Russian sources, it's a part of a strategy, proposed by the General Surovikin. He wanted to get a better position before the winter begins in this particular region. And you know that, the winters, Russia has always won the winter wars.
Rahim, if I could just jump in, I don't know if it's a sound from your mic. If you can just help us slow down a bit, just so we can pick out some of the things you're saying.
Yeah, I will continue like this. General Surovikin, is a new military appointed general by the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, to head the special military operation in Ukraine. And we have seen, since he was appointed as a military, new military leader to head the special military operation in Ukraine, many things happen. We have seen, Russians are retreating for the major part, according to the Russian sources, it's a part of their strategy in order to get the better position before the winter begins in Ukraine. So the Russians are very good, when it comes to fighting during winter. So in my opinion, the assessment presented by the U.S. general yesterday are preliminary, it has limitations, because the Russians are not going to back down, and Russians are continuously striking Ukraine, it's continuously targeting the Ukrainian critical infrastructure. And as we have seen, more than 10 million Ukrainians are out of electricity and power shortages, just because of the Russian missiles are attacking the key military infrastructure, critical infrastructure. So in my opinion, no. This is this analysis has limitation, whatever the Russian top U.S. general yesterday said, the Russians are losing war, or they're not going to gain further ground in Ukraine, and they must admit the defeat. I don't think so. The Russians have to take up a strategy. As I mentioned, in my earlier talks, Russia has 3 or 4 layers of strategy. At the first, this military operation was going to end in 2 months, but it continued till 6 months. The second strategy was this, if this continued longer, we have to change the position. So right now, we know that the whole conflict is in stage. So the Russians are thinking they cannot go back.
Rahim,